Then, next thing is objectives in the real life. Because until then I was just talking about theories and theoretical things, but let's see how does it work, how they are trying to operate. Okay, that's the more honest approach. So if we are going through the different laws, we can see that, okay, for the ECB it's really simple, because the whole ECB and the whole structure of the European monetary integration is not that old, so we have just one treaty about this, and the treaty of the functioning of the European Union defines the key objective. Since the Fed is already more than a century old, then obviously they have, and also they are operating in an Anglo-Saxon environment, that they doesn't have any specific law for the central bank. Instead, they have regulations here and there in their legislation system. So what we can see that 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 4 laws are defining it. Obviously, you don't have to learn this, so you are not lawyers. Just I wanted to show you that there are differences between the level of chaos. Also, in the case of the Swiss National Bank, it's also cute that federal constitution, so they were even defining the objectives in the constitution, not in different laws. In the case of Bank of Japan, they are operating nicely because they have a definite and also specific law about the Bank of Japan, so it's proper lawmaking, what we can see here. And also in the case of People's Bank of China, then we have also a decree specified for this central bank. So if you are going back to the good old days, which were really a long time ago, that we can see that this is when inflation targeting was highly popular. So 44 countries were doing this, the whole Eurozone and also the neighborhood around this one. But already what we can see here that, for example, US and Japan and also Switzerland was already categorized in the other category. So they were outliers already. Why? Because US is focusing on Taylor rule, which is the extended version of inflation targeting. So sometimes I can see the difference, but okay, IMF was doing this in their report. But if we are focusing on the rest of the world, we can see that, okay, 44 countries are a lot. But yeah, so the remaining 115 countries, which is even lotter, they were still focusing on exchange rate anchoring. So we can find here anchoring currencies like US dollar, euro, composite, baskets, and so on. So, for example, China was here in chlorine peg at that time. And also monetary aggregate target, which is, for me, still really strange that someone uses this framework, but 22 countries were using it. So, when I asked my PhD student Trung Bui, when he was writing the thesis, then he told me that, yeah, it's preferred if central banks' transmission channel is not that efficient. So if you would like to, or until you doesn't reach enough credibility as a central bank, and also until you are not able to have full control on your transmission mechanism, then monetary aggregate targeting is the best what you can get. So this is a worst case scenario, unfortunately, for any central banks, or at least 22. If you are going to the last known or published report, unfortunately since 2022 we don't have your report, then we can see that there are way more countries in this list. Just I try to pick up what is interesting here. So we can see that now the other category is 42. So it's absolutely terrible, and maybe that's the reason that they stopped to publish this, but just come on. They should do something with this, because this is the only information source where we can get all this data and validation in a coherent form. But what we can see here that US and Eurozone now in the other category. So, yeah, two insignificant economies and their central banks. Obviously, Switzerland is also there, but this is a much bigger issue. But at least Japan was able to go from the other category back to the inflation targeting, so some success was achieved. Otherwise, in case of inflation targeting framework and floating like regime, so it's free floating and other, so both floatings, we can say that this is the list of the countries. So we can see here many advanced economies, many emerging economies, and yeah. But at least China moved to the monetary aggregate targeting, so something happened there as well. And also they are in the other managed arrangements. So, yeah. Also, I wanted to show you that, okay, inflation targeting can be really nice, but what is the target? So, in many cases, if we are focusing on emerging European data, then we can see that whenever countries were introducing this one, they had higher inflation levels, so that's why the policy target for the medium run inflation was also higher. So even for Czech Republic, they started it at 6% in 1999 and then gradually dropped this to 3% until 2005, when they were already part of the EU, and then it dropped down to 2% in 2010, and then they are still walking around this 1%. Obviously, this has a confidence interval, so they are saying that, okay, but we have a plus minus 1% action radius, so they are doing mostly nothing until the inflation stays within this 3%, 1% band, but once they are able to see that expected inflation and also the empirical data works out of this, then they should do something. So they should increase their interest rate. So we can see the same thing for Poland, which was focusing at this 3%, then they dropped. And I don't know why, but they really like this 2.5%. Why is not 2%? Why is not 3%? 2.5% is better because it's more round number, what we can see or integer. Okay, Hungary have this 3% rule. So mostly what we can see here that countries which are stable, to be honest, so stable countries prefer the 2%. Less stable countries are preferring this 3%. Because until, so Balázs assembly as an effect suggests that until your productivity increases in your tradable sectors within the economy, then you should have higher inflation. So this can be the reason behind the 3% instead of the 2%. Also, some people, even from the ECB, in the late 2010s, they were suggesting that also you should they should increase the 2% inflation target to 3%, because the problem is that you are way too close to the 0%. So if economic activity drops significantly, so there is a demand shock downwards, then it will be really hard to act on it and to turn things back before falling into deflation. So people like Gali and other key economists already started to publish papers just after that COVID happened and then all the other things happened. So nowadays, inflation is much bigger problem than deflation, but still this is a theoretical issue that people can focus on this. And also, as an economist, I was always fascinated at how they were determining this 2% as a targeted inflation. So what kind of optimizations happened in the background until we were processing with our friends and colleagues already a huge book published in the early 2010s. This is only about monetary policy, different aspects of monetary policy. I can give it to you if you want it. in one specific chapter, they were talking about that why this 2% was set, and the reason was because this is the error level of the statistical offices to set or to define inflation well. So practically, this is the confidence interval that if you are at 2%, you can be in practice in 0% or you can be in 4%. So this is the error margin or error bar, how efficiently as a statistical institution you can define that where you are. So if we would live in a perfect world, then the central bank would have all the data without any omissions and mistakes and errors and fraudulent behaviors, then this inflation target would be at 0%, which is, for me, it was quite strange. Why would do this? But this book was written by really important people who are famous. So I was expecting for something much more sophisticated reason. And the reason why we have 3%, so this 1% above, this is only because these countries are emerging ones and they have still higher productivity growth. So this one is not as sophisticated, unfortunately, as I was expecting it, even if the whole framework was built up on the top of it. Yeah. So now let's see how does it look like. So in the case of the European Central Bank, what we can see here that they are focusing on price stability. And according to the central bank, this is not inflation targeting, this is price targeting. Nobody cares about it, so the rest of the literature says, okay, they are focusing on inflation because this is how we can measure it. Because if price level is changing, we can say inflation is happening. So even if they are precisely describing in their book that there are differences, just these differences are ignored by everyone. And without endangering this primary objective, we can focus on employment and balanced economic growth. So practically they are also focusing on output, some kind of an output data. According to empirical analysis, it can be better measured by focusing on the manufacturing industry and how manufacturing indexes are changing in the European continent. In the case of the US, they are using unemployment data, but yeah. Okay, if we are focusing on the different prices, in case of consumer price index or harmonized consumer price index, we can see that, for example, in 2010, they were using this kind of weights. Sometimes these weights are changing, but for us economists, it doesn't matter. So this is a statistical issue. So we are always getting harmonized data when we are downloading. Yeah. This one, Euro area's national central bank's contributions to the ECB's capital. So until the ECB was making profit, and it was generating profit until 2012 or 23, sorry, 22 or 23, until 1 year, until this bond market thingy happened, it was just generating cash. So it was always profitable, so mostly what they did there, that they paid majority of the profit to the central banks according to these weights, and still I think, if I remember well, 25% was kept as reinvested profit into the as part of the equity or own capital of the central bank. So, and the problem is that if they are suffering losses, so if they would lose all the equity, then these economies or these countries should put or raise equity according to these weights, because during the original setup, for some reasons, they were providing the equity within these ratios. I don't know what is the background of this, obviously, size of the different economies. Maybe it has a proper literature, just I wasn't able to find it, but this is what we can see here, that how shareholders are constructed around the ECB. Because after that, whenever there is a bond purchase program, these central banks, like Spanish or Greek or other central banks, must react as a subsidiary of the ECB. So when they are saying that, okay, you have to purchase this amount of government bonds, then they are saying that, okay, in Ireland we have 1% of the overall capital, so we have to purchase 1% of this predefined amount of government bonds. So this is how they can also harmonize the monetary policy instruments. Oh, sorry, I made a mistake. So it's 20%, not 25% of the net profits. Reinvested as a reserve fund. And whenever there is a loss, then first of all, they have to put it back. But right now everybody is waiting, because at the end of the day, central banks are not for-profit institutions. So nothing happens if you are not re-establishing the equity. Especially in this case, when you are sitting on a lot of government bonds, then it's really impossible to go to default. So this is not an original, or sorry, not original, but this is not an ordinary bank which can default, because literally they are printing money, so nothing wrong can happen. The Czech National Bank was in losses during the whole 2000s. What happened? Nothing at all. So the Czech koruna was still appreciating. They were just in losses because they had to consolidate their banks after a real estate bubble in the early 2000s. And after that, they were saying that, okay, we don't want to spend taxpayers' money or redirect taxpayers' money to re-establish the equity side of the, replenish the equity side of the Czech National Bank. Right now, the same thing is happening, just continental level. So it's not that serious if we are suffering losses. US Fed, in this case, we can see that, okay, this is a Keynesian thing, so promoting maximum employment. That's why they are focusing on the unemployment data. They need stable prices, so that's why they are focusing on price levels, and moderate long-term interest rate. This is quite unique, so this is not like in other central banks. And in operational level, if we are checking their own handbook, we can find Taylor rule. And later on I will talk about Taylor rule, but in this case it means that we are setting the key policy rate by focusing on the deviation from the targeted inflation and also from the potential growth. And ECB says that they are not following Taylor rule. Just if we are doing any kind of an empirical test, then we can see that they are following Taylor rule. So, yeah, it's sometimes it's quite strange, but we can model it easily, and later I will show you how to do it. In case of Swiss National Bank, we can see that again, price stability is favored, and also economic development was also favored, so practically Taylor rule again. Then in case of Bank of Japan, price stability, and it's a medium and long-term objective. And this was defined before when they were dropping into 3 decades of deflation. Yeah. Okay, when I made this slide, it was just this long, but now it's even longer. So right now, the deflation. So they were still focusing on inflation, just they wanted to achieve inflation. During the last 1 year, now they have 3% of inflation. The problem is that whenever Japan had some kind of an inflation, the next crisis or global crisis arrived on the global markets, and then there was again a supply shock, demand shock, and then this inflation disappeared. So right now I'm curious at what will happen, because it was always just they had 1 or 2 years of inflation whenever the next big thing happened. But anyway, they were really creative, so they were introducing qualitative and quantitative monetary easing in 2013, and later on some kind of a version of this was adopted also by the ECB 1 year later. So, in case of People's Bank of China, we can still see that stability of the value of the currency was objective, so this is foreign exchange. Objective, even if the law says that they are following a managed floating regime, we know that this is not the case, but okay. Then, independence of the monetary policy. I prefer this so much. So, neither the ECB nor the other national central banks, or even Hungarian central bank, or the Czech central bank, so which is not part of the Eurozone, cannot look or take instructions from the community, institutions or bodies or the governments. So in this case, we cannot say, or if government would like to win the next election and they cannot call the central bank of the head of the central bank on the phone that, oh, please cut interest rates because we need this. We would like to win elections. They can say that we don't want to because our key mandate is inflation targeting, so do proper monetary or fiscal policy next time. So people are saying that, okay, this was made because of German pressure, so if it would be up upon France, French or Italian politicians, it would not happen. But come on, at the same time, we can see all the other central banks as well that they are doing something like this. So this is not just a German invention that we have to do this. Okay, in case of US Fed, obviously because they have a president, everything is different. But it's independent within the government because whatever they are doing, it should be not signed by the president. But still, they are subject to oversight of the US Congress. So I think twice in a year, the head of the central bank should answer to questions at the US Congress. But that's the same thing for the ECB. So head of the central bank in frequent cases should go to the parliament and answer questions, even if policymakers cannot punish him or she, but or cannot pressurize to do something, but still they have to answer to these bodies. In case of Japan, the same thing is just, in this case, they always maintain close contact with the government, and monetary policy and fiscal policy should be mutually compatible, but again, this is common sense that it's never good if there is a fight between the two bodies. Okay, in the case of People's Bank of China, we can see that there are many different actors sitting in the monetary council, so we cannot say that this is independent from the fiscal policy. Yeah, and now let's have some empirical analysis because we have plenty of time. So Taylor rule. So nowadays, when people are saying that, oh, we cannot understand that how interest rates are defined, yes, we can. So